Hello, and welcome to or welcome back to Lauren's Legends. Sometimes life just, goes by in a blink of an eye and you look up and you realize you haven't uploaded in about 3 months. But I am back. I've got a new background that I'm very excited about. And I've told you before that I live outside of Asheville, North Carolina. And I am very excited about today's story because it is near and dear to my heart. And I can't wait to share it with you. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Did you know that nestled in the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, lies the largest home in the entire United States? This gorgeous mansion was built and owned by George Vanderbilt. George was born in 1862 in Staten Island, New York. He was born into an extremely rich family of the famed Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was a huge industrialist, built several different things and railroads. Even though the family had more money than I could ever begin to imagine, they were very well known to be very kind and giving towards others. In 1886, he traveled to Asheville with his mother. He was around the age of 26 at the time and completely fell in love. He decided that this is where he was going to build his vacation home that would end up being his almost all year round home. Originally, he purchased 125,000 acres. It is said that he purchased everything that he could see with his own eyes, and he wanted it to all be his land. Now, if you know anything about this area, you'll know that the terrain is very rough, and in order to bring all the materials, workers, and guests that he would like to bring to his home, he decided to build a massive railway, and that railroad is actually what helped build Asheville up to what it is today. He began his process of building the home in 1889. This massive 175,000 square feet, 250-room French Renaissance chateau with 65 fireplaces was finished and opened to friends and family on Christmas Eve in 1895. As time went on, George met Edith Dresser, and they married in 1898. He then brought her home to live at the Biltmore, and she herself also fell in love with it. Now, I could be friends with Edith, not just because she had an amazing French Renaissance chateau, but she was a massive animal lover, and it was said that if you couldn't find her, just go look in the stables, and she would be there with her horses. I could totally relate to that. Again, the Vanderbilts were known to be very nice people, and in that day and age, it was unheard of, almost looked down upon for high class to teach their slaves as equals. But they really stood out above many other people, and they treated them with love and respect. The slaves were, or their workers, is how they thought of them, were also paid a New York wage. Living in Asheville, North Carolina, and making a New York wage, they truly were able to buy their own things and have their own property. But even with all these perks, they would not quit. These people truly worked for them until the day they died. They would have generation after generation that would stay and work and live in that house. So much so that there's actually a floor that is the servants' quarters, but they have their own rooms. It's very rare to find that in history where the rooms were nice and they still had a chamber pot, but they had heat and they would have their own bed and their own privacy. George and Edith, throughout their life, they only had one child. That child was a girl named Cornelia. Cornelia was born inside of the house in 1900. She grew up with the workers' children since she was an only child and was very known to never look down upon others and to treat everybody the same. And she had her own sons later on in life and treated them or taught them to treat others the same way. And I really respect that about this family. Having all the money in the world, they were still very kind to others. Now, the Vanderbilts were known, again, to throw lavish parties, and they loved to have people from all over the world come and stay with them. They had many famous people that I'm going to list off, and know that this is a short list, and it's not limited to how many people actually stayed there. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor stayed there, Marilyn Monroe, Judy Garland, Al Capone, Franklin D. Roosevelt are all well known to have stayed there, and there's pictures of them there as well. Growing up in North Carolina, it is a pretty big staple around here, and we actually went to the Biltmore on field trips and family trips. I've been there several times, and going around, it takes my breath away every single time I go. Every single season it looks different, and there's gardens outside that are absolutely beautiful in the spring and summer, and then fall with the colors changing, and the winter and Christmas time and the candlelight services. It just is absolutely amazing. When it comes to talking about the inside of the house, it's really hard for me to just pick out a couple of different rooms and spaces to talk about, but these are very important areas that we're going to go through and we're going to talk about. When you walk in the home, you see this beautiful ornate entry, and go right to your right. There is a winter garden. Now this garden's here all year long, but it has glass for the ceiling so you can see up and you can see the sky shining through, and it has priceless statues in the middle of it, and the room is amazing with the acoustics. And in the winter around Christmas time, they actually have orchestras come in and play, or maybe a child group will come in and sing Christmas carols, and it's absolutely incredible how the sound bounces off all the walls inside. As you continue on, the next massive room you're going to come to is the Great Room. And in this Great Room, it immediately gives me Game of Thrones vibes. I mean, the long table, you can see the royalty sitting there. There's humongous fireplaces on both sides that I just want to curl up with a book and lay there all day long. But there is a second floor, and on the second floor they have a huge organ that when they would have the big dinners down below, someone would sit there and play as they ate and entertain them. Outside of the Great Room, there's just nothing, there's no corner of this place that is never going to cease to amaze me. There's several other rooms. There's the breakfast room where the ladies would sit. There's a parlor room. It goes on, and every single one of these would have their own place and their own purpose. And one thing I've always found extremely interesting is that every single ceiling in the entire building, for each and every room, even the private rooms, have their own specific ceilings, whether it's a gold ceiling or a painting, or they'd even have cloth in the areas where the ladies would sit and gossip to help drown the noise and keep it down, so they could tell their secrets. And in these rooms, there's priceless artifacts that I can't even begin to describe. It has been collected from all over the world through paintings and trinkets and statues. It just goes on and on of it, the best museum I've been to. And it is a home, but it's a museum at the same time. As you're walking through this area, they have these huge doors that you can go out of, and it is this massive veranda on the outside. And this veranda has these arch like areas where it's arch throughout. And on the back end, there are rocking chairs. And you can go and stand in the corners and you can see these amazing towers that are on the side of the building where you can stand out and look. And all this while, your view is just as far as you can see, rolling mountains. And it is amazing when you stand out there, the gravity of, he owned all of that at one point. Now today, he's still, or the estate is still 8,000 acres, which is massive, but that used to all belong to the Vanderbilts. When you come back in from the veranda, you go another time to the right, and there's this long hallway, and it is absolutely incredible. You're going to hear me say that over and over again. I apologize, but I mean it every single time. On the left side of the hallway, there's 3 different tapestries that are dated to be from the 16th century. These are the only tapestries of those kind that actually exist in the entire world today. And the artwork in them is just absolutely breathtaking. And I stood there and stared at them for way too long. And then at the end of that hallway is the library. My favorite place in the entire house is the library. I'm a library nerd myself. I love it. One day I'm going to have a massive one that's going to be somewhat modeled after the Biltmore's library, but it immediately gives you those Beauty and the Beast vibes. It is 2 stories. And the far back corner, there is a spiral staircase that goes up to the 2nd floor. The library was also George Vanderbilt's favorite place in the entire house. He collected books from all over the world. He actually, in that library alone, has 24,000 books. And they're all rare books. That was his favorite thing to collect, was the rare books. In the middle of it, there is a wall, and it has a beautiful fireplace that has a bench in front of it. And I can just imagine sitting there and sitting by the fire on a winter day, reading your book, because on the other side, there's windows that again reach out towards the mountains, being the view. One of the most impressive things in the library is the ceiling. You can't talk about it without mentioning it. The ceiling was actually painted by Pellegrini. It is titled The Chariot of Aurora. The ceiling was originally located in a palace in Venice, Italy, and he paid for them to move it all the way across the ocean and place it in his library. Continuing on outside of the library, you go back down that hall and to the right. It's like a big circle. You start going through the right and you can just go all the way through as you do the tour. When you reach the staircase, you're at the base of it, and it goes up 4 stories, and it is a spiral staircase the whole way up. The architecture of this staircase is absolutely insane. And there is a light that comes through all the way down, or chandelier. And every single floor, it's got its different architecture on the actual chandelier. I found out while I was there that the entire thing is held on by 1 bolt at the top of the ceiling. The reason being is mountains get made by faults, lines, and earthquakes, and it doesn't matter if there's like a small earthquake, the whole thing will be safe because of the way that it's weighted and held up top. And I found that very fascinating. I could sit here again and talk about this place all day, but there is one last place that I do want to talk about. This is the one place that, for me personally, in the entire house, is the only place that I felt a little bit weird and a little bit off. And I don't know if it's the acoustics or just the vibe of this underground indoor pool, but there is something a little bit creepy to it. It is very pretty. It's beautifully done, but it is on the bottom level in the home. And it is indoors, and it's kind of creepy because it echoes. And when Jake and I were here, or when Jake and I were there, we yelled out, hello, and you could hear it, hello, hello, hello. And it's in this little enclosed area. And you think about back in the day, they would have these huge parties with 50 people in there. It really dawns on you how loud and wild it would be to be in such a small space with that many people. Now, this brings me to talking about the legends. Not only does the Biltmore estate have plenty of legends to talk about, it also has many haunting stories as well. There is something very off about the gate to the property. Now, at the front of the property is an absolutely beautiful gate. In the middle of it, you have this rock or stone built middle area that they check your tickets and check you in. But there's two really interesting stories that have happened there. And the first one happened in 1922. And even though there is an official record that this happened, it is extremely vague. And I researched into it as far as I possibly could. And I can tell that something really did happen, but I couldn't find any more information about it. All I could find, and the way the story goes, is that a tragedy occurred with 5 boys in a car. They apparently had driven up to the gate, and they were acting extremely erratically. There was a gate guard named Brooks, and he could hear them saying, "We're going to take it. We're going to take this place." And then he saw weapons. Brooks and his partner, at this point, when they see the weapons, believe that the best thing to do is fire at the vehicle to stop them from whatever their nefarious plan is. The statement states that 2 of the boys were killed and 2 were injured, and 1 was able to get them out of there. There's nothing else, but 2 people were killed there in 1922 at the gate. Now, not far in from the gate, actually last year in 2022, and this is an awful, it's so sad. A family was driving in, beautiful day, to go and see the Biltmore. Not long after they got right in from the gate, there was a very heavy storm and high winds, and an old tree fell directly on the car. It killed a New York firefighter almost instantly in the car, and his family were there too. They were unharmed, but that's just awful. So those 2 things happened very close to the gate. It's kind of weird. It's eerie. Inside the house, there were so many ghost stories, I had to be very selective. I, of course, wanted to talk about George and Edith Vanderbilt's stories because I feel like they're really the stars of this and their home. George had created this home to be his heaven on earth. He loved it deeply. And when he passed away in 1914, it is said that he never left it. When he was alive, one of his favorite hobbies was to go into the library and watch as a storm would roll in. He would love to sit there and feel the thunder and see the storm coming down right outside the window. People still believe that he does that to this day. When storms begin to roll in, there have been several workers and people that are visiting see that when there's a storm going on, they've seen a dark figure sitting in his chair in that room and smelling what smells like smoke from the fireplace. Even Edith felt him in the library after he passed away. She was known to go in there and sit and talk to him for hours as if he was sitting right there beside her. Not long after Edith passed away, people began reporting hearing her walking down the hallways. When she was alive, it was normal for her to walk down and let George know when it was time to greet his guests. Now many visitors walking that same hallway report suddenly the temperature dropping and feeling as if a breeze goes by them, and then ever so quietly hearing, "George?" It cannot be stated enough how much George and Edith loved a good party. In the grand dinner room, they would have these huge get-togethers. To this day, very late at night, when the workers are, finishing everything up and beginning to lock the doors, they are said to hear glasses clanking, laughter, and an organ playing. They will go and check the room, seeing if anybody is still in the house, only to find nothing at all. A very well-known legend is that at one of their lavish parties in the pool, a child of a very close friend unfortunately was playing when nobody was watching them, and they accidentally drowned. No one actually knew that there was anything wrong until a person actually felt the body beside them. The legend has been disputed time and time again, and there is no official report that this ever happened. But who would want to come out and tarnish the Biltmores? Today, many people report hearing splashing and giggling as if it's coming from a child, seeing orbs, and hearing the laughter of the eternal party that never stops. The creepiest story to take place on the entire estate grounds comes from the old forestry compound. It was originally the Biltmore Forestry School. This has become known as the site that a prostitute was murdered. Again, there are no reports from this, but this is something that has been a legend for over 100 years at this point. There has to be some credence to it because the number of sightings of people walking around the grounds at night and going and looking at it, they tend to see a woman hanging, which is what the legend was on how the prostitute was murdered, swinging back and forth in the doorway. Well, that's it for tonight with the Biltmore Estate. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please comment, like, and subscribe. I am back with tons of content coming your way. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching.